The real deal with tithing.
Nothing can clear a room faster than talking about tithing.
Tithing is kind of all over the place.
Ministers and charismatic leaders.
A tithe is a gift of 1/10 of the whole.
Petitioning and sometimes even pleading.
But obviously we have attached a whole lot more to it than that.
To give till it hurts.
The importance of not hoarding our good.
Hello and welcome to the 100th episode of Truth Be Told, Nacho Mama's Prosperity. And so this whole month we've been talking about abundance, and this week we're talking about the real deal with tithing. All right, don't go anywhere. I know I said the T word, but we're really going to kind of unpack maybe some of the fears when we hear this word tithing, and maybe open up a different way of looking at this idea of giving, this idea of participating in this law of circulation that we know the universe is based on, in a way that we can actually not only participate in this giving, but be active participants in the results of what happens when we give and when we receive. And so we're going to kind of unpack maybe some old mentalities around tithing and hopefully expand our view of what this looks like in the here and now, and what all this has to do with abundance and how we can participate in it in a way that is easy and joyful, in a way that creates a world that works for everyone. So if everybody's ready, we're going to enter this with an open mind, and hopefully we're going to learn a lot about the real deal with tithing. So sit back and enjoy the 100th episode of Truth Be Told.
Hey! You want to hear a really good joke about nachos? Nah, it's too cheesy. Oh. Why should you always bring a bag of chips to a party? In case of emergency.
I'm going to talk about tithing, the basic chips and dip version. Now, hopefully I haven't scared you off, because nothing can clear a room faster than talking about tithing. And just a little secret, I have one eye on the door as we speak. I think a lot of us have tithing scars. So for those still brave enough to continue watching, here we go. And just to relieve your mind, we are going somewhere, maybe somewhere you've never been before. Okay, ready? Here we go. So when I say the word tithing, it often conjures up images of ministers and charismatic leaders petitioning and sometimes even pleading the audience or congregation to give, and to give till it hurts, or this is what's expected, or this is what you're supposed to do if your faith is strong enough, you are dedicated enough, and if you are spiritual enough. Now, don't get me wrong, tithing is not a bad thing or even something to be avoided. I actually am in full support of it as a spiritual practice. Now, tithing in its literal sense means a tenth, and I'm not completely sold on this idea as a hard and fast rule. But for our purposes here, I want us to take a closer look more at the energy behind it, rather than the dollars and cents of it all. Okay, everybody out there, let's take a deep breath. The practice of tithing has often been taught using a dash, and sometimes more than a dash, of the energy of obligation. Give us a tenth of what you have and it will come back to you 100-fold. Or without your tithe, we're going to have to close our doors. And you get the picture. Obligation in this sense of if you don't do it, then you are not doing this whole spiritual thing right. It often has been seen as a measuring stick to spiritual health, to commitment, and even to faith. Now, I don't know about you, but this doesn't seem like a super great jumping off space. In fact, it feels like this energy actually hinders the flow instead of adding to it or allowing it. Along with obligation can come its second cousin guilt and their next door neighbor fear. And all this energy swirled together can sometimes make giving less of a spiritual practice and more of a thing we check off a list because we have to, or we're expected to, or feel we have to do in order to earn favor, a spiritual badge, or to prove our faith. But what if there was another way of looking at this? What if there was a way to transform the energy of giving in a way that is supportive of our understanding of the law of circulation within the universe, allowing us to not only step into the flow of giving and receiving, but to be active participants to what it creates. Active participants in communities and their transformative impact on the world. So if you're saying, yes, please, tell us more, then you're going to love what comes next.
It is no secret when we look at our world that conflict, polarization, and a framework of discontent abounds.
What if that didn't have to be?
What if that didn't have to be?
What if that didn't have to be?
The truth is that underneath it all is our innate hardwiring for love, connection, and belonging.
In our ever-evolving experience, now is the time.
Now is the time.
Is the time to unlearn societal constructs of the past.
And relearn what it means to be human.
To be human.
What it means to be human and a part of the global community.
This can only be done together.
This can only be done together.
This can only be done together.
We are being called to pack away the us versus them mentality and instead embrace the profound power of we.
Join Soul Evolution Collaborative.
Join Soul Evolution Collaborative
for the O-Shift Healing the Divide Summit,
November 14th through 17th.
November 14th through the 17th.
This event, through powerful speakers, engaging workshops, and collective conversation, will explore the transformative effects of healing the divide.
Now is the time for change.
Now is the time for healing.
Now is the time for healing the divide.
So here is the real deal with tithing. Tithing is kind of all over the place. I think it's often misused, misunderstood, sometimes even utilized to mislead. From a form of communal care to individual spiritual practice to an obligation to your faith community, tithing has been all over the map. Simply put, a tithe is a gift of 1/10 of the whole. But obviously we have attached a whole lot more to it than that. So let's go back to the beginning. Tithing finds its origins in the Bible. The concept of tithing is first mentioned in Genesis 14, 18 through 20, when Abraham gives 1/10 of what he won in battle to the king as a gift. Note that it was not called a tithe. It wasn't out of obligation, it was simply a gift. And, mind you, this was way back in the day when there was a belief in many gods, and it was really important to keep yours happy. At least that was the belief. The Jewish faith had a covenant with their God. If they worshiped this God and only this God, then he would protect them. According to their belief, it was important at the time to make sure that the gods, especially theirs, was happy. Tithing is then mentioned all throughout Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy as part of the laws of the Jewish faith. Then, later in Nehemiah, tithing is discussed again in further detail, outlining how tithes are to be, get this, gathered and distributed. Then, in the book of Malachi, we find one of the most quoted verses on tithing, Malachi 3:10. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. It was common practice back in the day that a tithe was to be given back to the community. 10% of crops and animals were to be brought to the storehouse and then distributed to the poor and those in need. Tithing was a charity intended to care for one's own community. Was this done out of obligation? Did everyone always enjoy giving back to the care of the community? I have no idea. What is clear when we look at the historical context is that tithing was about taking care of each other, caring for your neighbors, helping each other out. There's certainly a lot of room in this conversation for making up one's own mind about what tithing means and even if and when to practice. Tithe if you want to, if it feels good. But what seems super clear to me, and this is not true because it is in the Bible, but probably in the Bible because there is truth to it, and that is the importance of not hoarding our good. Grasping too tightly to what we have restricts us from being part of the flow of life. The possessiveness of believing this thing right here is mine. I earned it. I own it. This disconnects us from the whole that we are a part of. Yes, enjoy what you have co-created. Enjoy that which makes its way into your experience. But let's not get too caught up in that restrictive clinging, which currently seems pretty common. Engage actively in the flow. That doesn't mean give away all of your things. It doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't have things. It just means that hoarding things, making the things more important than the experience, restricts your experience of life. And this is true for all aspects of our life. We can't be freely flowing in one way and restrictive in another and think the two will operate in separation. Life exists in a creative flow of ever-changing experiences. Our participation in that flow is our co-creative nature, the giving freely of ourselves, of our experience. And what an uplifting perspective on giving. What if we only ever gave when or where it felt good to do so? Yes, let us give charitably when we are able, of what we are able, time, talent, and treasures. And let's do it in a way that feels right, that feels good, that helps to take care of your neighbors, physical and spiritual. The way you give of yourself and your unique experience has a tremendous impact on the world. Imagine if everyone on the planet gave freely of the thing that made them uniquely them, without strings attached, without concern for profit, without obligation or need. What if we each just gave? How different the world would be. Everyone having their needs met, being taken care of, no lack, no going without, just pure abundance. What if we treated giving like a superpower?
I kind of feel like drop the mic. Like I don't even know what else we could say.
Superpower, boom.
It is, but it's that energy. Like even when you were talking, I kind of felt like, yeah. It kind of makes you want to give. When we have, and it just makes me think that, and we've talked about this over this year. I mean, that's kind of innate. That which is within us, that it's already there, and it gets kind of covered up with like fear and the frameworks and all the things that we operate in. But I think that in the essence of who we are is our nature to give, is our nature to want to care for one another. I mean, we see that like even like kids, I mean, it's just it's our nature to help, our nature to come together as community. And so it just feels like that this conversation is just another conversation of like bringing us back into like remembrance. Oh yeah. If we actually could tap into this, like I even just kind of caught the wave of that energy of what that would look like if we saw giving and tithing in this area, spiritual communities that go out and take care of the community, not just the people that come through the doors, but like the community, like that. I mean, that's the real deal stuff.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes me excited about giving,
Right.
and receiving. It's this like this both,
Yeah.
both and.
Well, I have to be honest, it kind of felt like there was like this whole like movies worth, like full feature length films worth of information that
a trilogy.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, like to because in a way, like I was trying to stay out of like the debunking and just like, here's what is, like, here's some information about this, right? And what was like, if there was one nugget to take away from this segment, what's the nugget, right? And so nugget one from the first, from your segment, it's like, oh yeah, don't give out of obligation. That is so familiar.
It's an icky energy.
Disappointing. It's such a and so like we obviously talked to each other in preparation for all this, so I kind of knew where that was going, and so I was like, all right, what would be if I'm recognizing I've given out of obligation, what do I want to take away from this? And so yeah, I mean, I do think giving is such a huge part of our lives, part of life itself, and it's really interesting how we can be so giving as people in certain ways, but then yet over here in this one other way, society says, no, like money, no, you got to hoard your money. Helping somebody, like only in emergencies, like times of emergency,
or only if they deserve it.
Yeah, or if they right, but like helping somebody just live, no, like we can't. I'm like, oh, it's wow, what? And then the other, like, the rest of the movie then is like detaching, like tithing. I have only ever heard tithing outside of our conversations. I've only ever heard tithing referred to along with money. So maybe it wasn't always just money, but it had definitely included money. And so it's really interesting to go back to like the root of it was not money.
Yeah,
like
food and
the birth of the idea was giving of all of these gifts, giving from battle, because we want this God to like be happy.
Right.
But then the idea of like stocking the storehouse for times of need and to help those who needed it. I'm not stocking it for me when there's some major world disaster. I'm stocking it for everybody. So anytime anything happens, we're all cared for.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what a different energy that has than this idea of like, this is the one I think I've heard most often over the last several years is tithe it's a spiritual practice and it should feel good because you're giving of your money. You're going to give 10% of your overflow because you trust so much that it's going to come back to you 10 times that. And it's like,
it's like a giving to get, which
it's like
which then kind of it takes that communal support origin kind of out of it.
It's a totally different thing.
Well, and I think it's it doesn't. I don't think there's any subject within, well, just in general, but especially in spiritual circles that can really get us pricked than money. And I even recognized when I was writing the segment, I was like, oh, I'm afraid I was going to. I did have that fear of like, oh, this may step on like some toes. This kind of idea that around tithing, but because it is, and I understand that it's a challenging subject, but I think when we approach it from the purest framework of this is how we can support our community. This is how we can support, those around us. It's taking care of one another. And I think what's happened is, the framework in which we operate now is we're very isolated. even with people in, our spiritual communities that we attend events with, or we attend, Sunday services with. Yeah, we're come together as a community, and then we go home. And then there's this really, we live very disconnected lives from one another, which is very different from kind of the origins of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
And I recognize that. And it's, this is the cultural context that we're operating in. But, wouldn't it be interesting to see what if we've talked about this all the time, like, but we could actually go back to that sort of framework of caring for one another. And not necessarily, we don't have to like live in a commune, even though that'd be fabulous. But even in our minds, like this flow of energy and money that are coming into our community, how can we as a community then take this abundance and then use it to support not only the people in the community, but the people in the outside community, instead of this energy of, bring the money in so we can pay the light bill, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, that energy of that. And all those things are reality, of course, but I don't know. It's
well, and I think
giving to that vision of support feels energy producing. It doesn't feel like I'm losing anything. It feels like I'm gaining things. And I think that's what is meant by, when he says, bring into the storehouse and then I will give you an overflow. And I think the overflow, I don't think necessarily was overflow of the thing that you've given. Now you're going to get more of it back. The overflow was the energy that happens when we give and support one another.
Well, think about that.
Overflow is the community.
Right. What's possible when you all live and work and operate together, though? Yeah, exactly. The overflow is every single person is always cared for. It always has all their needs met. Something happens in your family, everybody's there. So a tragedy happens over here. A house burns down. Here, let's build it again. Here's some food. Here's a place to stay. Like there's just always this network, this net to catch you in this support system. And what I find super weird about all of this, because like, socialism is a bad word, right? Like we're in a society where like,
is it?
I mean, not for me. But we have to know what it is. Like, let's actually know. Right. I mean, I think there's been such distortion of the understanding of the word, but yeah. I mean, when you have this social network, you don't have to do that all on your own, which is what we've created. And so ironically, within spiritual community, like tithing, I think for a lot of people, you hear the word tithing and the imagery that you talked about in your segment was right on. Like it's this charismatic leader, give us all your money. And so you'll experience blah, 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 whatever. Or the pleading of like, please, our light bills due this month and blah, 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 and give all you have because woe is right or whatever. I don't know. That the correlation of tithing to like the church in need kind of thing, and then the obligation of, I think that actually comes out of not talking about money, because we don't want our spiritual communities to talk about money. And so, I think like the traditional church format was like, we don't talk about money until a bill is due. And so then I think it swung the other way, where it's like the forward thinking way was, we're going to talk about money, but then it swung into this like prosperity gospel-y kind of spectrum, I think. And in either way, we're not actually talking about money. Like we're not actually having conversations about money. Like I could understand where an unskilled or frustrated or even a very skilled minister, misguided, is going to stand up there and preach tithing, because how else are you going to get the community? Like how are you going to get that community paid for? I mean, that was the mindset. It was like, it's paid for by the people, which is also really ironic because we don't believe in socialism, and yet our communities are paid for by the people. So like same thing. Like I think part of our conversation this month is actually talking about money. And so for me, the idea of being able to separate tithing from just conversations about money, like, does this community need to be funded? Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to stand up here and be like, you should tithe because, like, no, like you anyone watching, you get to decide what you do with your money. If you feel fed by like 10 different places and you want to give to all 10 of those places, do that. Like, give where it feels good, you know. If that's helping other people, awesome. If your version of giving is like, hey, I'm in a tight financial spot right now and you have time to go volunteer somewhere, like we give in so many different ways. And I think for me, that's like the super ironic thing is avoiding the conversations about money put us in the places general, all of us, right? Like avoiding the conversations about money put us in places where we need to have uncomfortable conversations about money, where we don't know how to talk about money because we didn't have the conversations in the first place. I think, myself included, I'm sure, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you know, and so I think, you know, step one of this too, like step one for me in the tithing conversation has been just recognizing the obligation piece actually has nothing to do with the money. It's just that money is the vehicle for the obligation to come.
And it's interesting because it plays on. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference. So, you know, when you think about obligation, like this obligation of like, okay, well, I guess I have to do it because, you know, whatever. And then there's a different side of obligation, which I think is what we're talking about, which is responsibility to. We have a responsibility to the community, and that has a different energy of obligation. But I think we do have a responsibility to care for one another. You know, and I think that that's kind of what we're tapping into is that, you know, tithing and giving, you know, in spiritual communities or in other social places, wonderful organizations that are doing amazing supportive work in the world, you know, giving to those places activates this responsibility to one another. It activates the power that happens when we care for one another. And so, you know, we talk about giving as a spiritual practice. That doesn't just mean spiritual communities. It means giving in all areas. You know, I mean, there are so many amazing opportunities for us to give in so many areas that actually propel this energy of community care forward. And I think that when we can tap into that as a vision, I think it really just changes this whole money conversation in a lot of ways, especially in the context of, you know, spiritual communities and what we're talking about.
Yeah. And I actually have a perfect personal example of that. So for years, I had taught adjunct. I was an adjunct band teacher for several different high schools in the area and mostly marching band stuff. And so in the fall, you know, we would spend all summer practicing, you know, learning, you know, marching band stuff. And in the fall, we'd have all these practices and, you know, competitive bands. They'd go off to competitions and perform their shows outside the football field and everything. Had done this for years. And so when I got into ministerial school, was like everything kind of had this constriction of time, of money, because it was an extra expense of, I mean, just availability, bandwidth. I mean, everything just, and so I, you know, it just felt like a time where like, all right, I think I'm done with this. Like it's been great. This feels complete. And, every once in a while since had thought about like, well, yeah, I really did. There were a lot of pieces of it that was like, man, I would really never miss doing that part again. But then there were pieces of it where like, yeah, but that one piece kind of feels like it outweighs the whole thing.
Right.
So this year, the last school that I had worked with, which I was at for several years, reached out because the person who they thought they had lined up then didn't make it. I don't know, whatever. And essentially I was invited to, you know, hey, are you available? Can you come this week and just hang with us, whatever? And so I went to one of the rehearsals one night and it was like the floodgates like opened of like, oh yes, oh my God, it was this, it's, you know, and of course it's like, it was the first week of this, you know, this series of abundance. And it was like, immediate like, oh, this is abundance. Oh, this is me. And I realized that there was we each carry with us like a certain essence, a certain sense of like people feel it, and I could sense from the kids that there was just this like calming, like, oh, we're okay, we're cared for, like yeah, there's somebody here to work with us, like we're good, okay. And like immediately there was this shifting in how rehearsals went and how the kids were performing. I mean, it was just, everything was just like, it just all of a sudden got really grounded, and it was, it was, anyway, I was like, oh, this is that thing that like I could teach here. I could give of it, like that piece of me, I could give of myself any day of the week and never get tired from doing that. Are there other pieces to it that, yeah, okay, maybe, probably, but like if I could do this, I would never get tired of that. I would never get tired of that. And it has the reciprocal effect of that. I had that restriction that happened when school, like I have still, like, graduating in 2020 from ministerial school, like I'm still like loosening back up those restrictions, and I felt like that night was this like boost forward in the loosening of that, like of just letting that flow. So I've gone, I don't know, 5 or 6 times since, and it's just like, oh,
it seems like that's like the essence of abundance.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've been talking about, that, abundance is not like dollars and cents. Like we kind of reduce abundance to that, which is kind of icky. But abundance is that. It's that. Or it's the making the casserole and sharing it with your neighbor, and having that kind of connection. That's abundant. I mean, it's like all these different things are abundance, or that unexpected call, or that support from someone or from a community in times of challenge or need. I mean, that's abundance. And so it's like that thing. It's interesting because it's like, it's hard to like put a name to it, but when you can feel it. And it's interesting that you say, because it's expansive. So if it's constrictive, then it's not in the alignment of what abundance is. So it's like abundance is always expansive. Giving from that space of abundance is always expansive. And that doesn't mean that we don't set boundaries for ourselves that are healthy and things of that nature. Because I think we can swing the other way and just give of ourselves, time, money, talent, treasure, until you have nothing left. We're not swinging that. We're not swinging that in.
Right. Yeah.
Because that also can be rampant in this conversation as well. But it's like, it is just giving from that space of wholeness, of completeness. It's a really interesting energy, but like you said, it's always expansive.
Yeah. And I think, the counter to that is, I think we can see pretty clearly, right? Like current events, like if we look out into the world around us right now, not claiming it as my experience, because I am not directly feeling that, but I think it's really clear to see how when as a society we hoard money, the effects of it are so drastic, and we are. I mean, we're literally seeing the outpicturing of the hoarding of money, right? The worshiping and hoarding of money, and that doesn't mean that money is evil or anything. It means that the systems we have are totally out of whack. They were designed wacky, and they were designed in a way that allowed for, this massive stockpiling of finances for fewer and fewer people. And so when you have a system that's designed where everyone needs money to be part of the system, you have these, that restrictive energy is just like spreading. And so I don't claim to have any like financial secrets or like, keys of wisdom or magic pills or whatever.
Well, that's the only reason I showed up.
But I will say I will say, I mean, I to the extent of our day to day, our thoughts do affect our experience. Gotta love the cats. I think it's the first time we've had a cat on the show. That's impressive, seeing how we both have them running around.
She snuck in. She snuck in.
But I want to be cautious how I say this, because I think that our thoughts can influence the reality of our experience, right? And I say that because, so I have had this experience of going and doing this teaching and how expansive that feels. And so I've just been in this like expansive place. And have finances shifted in that space? Yeah, like noticeably. Is that a direct correlation? It seems it might be. So I hesitate to be like, yeah, just get into an expansive place and your whole financial situation is like, right. That's like, I think that's like old. I don't know, old. Those are like the medium old prosperity thoughts creeping in. I'm like,
right.
I don't know. Like universal law says, yeah, our thoughts affect our reality. We can change our thoughts and our beliefs and whatever, and our reality will shift. It will begin to change.
Right.
We had this conversation like with food. Like you would never tell someone who's hungry to just think harder about food.
Right.
Work harder to get food. Right. I think the same thing is true financially, and at the same time, I think finding yourself in this expansive place will only create more and more good. So does that mean it's an immediate shift? Does that mean millions of dollars automatically show up? I won't deny anybody that. Maybe it does. I don't know. But it is really interesting to like, I think that thing that we do where we like break down the topic we're talking about and like sit out with pieces and then like try and read. I don't know if you did that as a kid. I did that all the time.
Yeah.
Like dissect things, take them all apart, look at all the pieces, and then put them back together. And like, does it still work? Is it still the thing? It's kind of what this feels like to me. This month in particular kind of feels like, taking apart the old telephone and seeing if I could put it back together again.
And I think the opportunity we've had this month is to really kind of look closely at our beliefs about this. And that's what happens when we look closely about our beliefs, whether they are beliefs that we've kind of been the sponge for, which we are the sponge for a lot of beliefs. So when we begin to like really look at these beliefs that we've kind of been holding in our pockets, and say, oh, is that my belief, or is that something that I was taught, or is that something that I believed and it worked and now it really doesn't fit anymore? And so I think that's what happened is we've been like taking the little beliefs out of our pocket and saying, yeah, we'll keep this one, but this one probably, needs to go. It's been really heavy. And so then the result of that is traveling with what we need. It's expansive. It's light. It's makes room for other beliefs, makes room for other experiences, makes room for other perspectives, and it makes room for us to participate not only in the giving but in the receiving too. So that's kind of the way it works, right? Which has been the beauty of this month.
Yep. Dare I say, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
It is good stuff.
It is all good stuff.
It's true. Oh, I'm supposed to put you up on screen again.
Yeah. I was waiting. Well, see, that wasn't that bad. We made it through the whole time. I know tithing and money in this conversation could be a little scary, but the more we have conversations about those things that are scary or those things that we've kind of held on to beliefs for a long, long time. And sometimes it's really hard to look at them and to explore them because it can be fearful. But when we begin to do that, then we begin to kind of create more space for this good to flow, more space for this abundance to flow, more space for expansive views and perspectives. And so it can be scary sometimes. And that's the beauty of doing this together, knowing that we don't have to do it alone, knowing that we're here to support one another and to love each other through this thing we call life. So if you want to continue this conversation, we will be talking about this at a little bit deeper level on our Thursday night, The Gathering. And you can find the link to sign up on our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. It's a great group of folks that join us on Thursday and take a little bit deeper dive where we share of our own experiences around this topic and how it shows up in our lives. So it's a great way to build and to support the community. And as always, our second Sunday experience, just a little side thing, our second Sunday experience is starting at a new time. So this Sunday, our virtual pop-up and second Sunday experience will start at 6:30 and it will run from 6:30 to 7:30. So we hope everyone will come and join us, come check it out and see what it's all about. And so if we don't see you either Thursday or Sunday, then we'll see you here next week. Have a great week.